The problem is that because inflation got so high, the value of these bonds went down, and so they didn't have enough assets to cover all of their liabilities. So why did those inflation go up? And we know the inflation went up because of Biden's reckless spending.
Welcome to the Debrief, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the headlines they're covering and where the story's going next. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined today by commentary editor Conn Carroll. And Conn, you've written an interesting piece on the ultimate anti-woke March Madness bracket. Can you explain what you're talking about a little bit?
Sure. So, it's March Madness time. Favorite office distractions, filling out pools, bracket pools. And
basketball, sports ball.
Yes. The NCAA tournament has started.
Yes.
So what I did is a couple of years ago, the Heritage Foundation released a report that went through each of the schools in the big Power 5 conferences, so not every university, but just the ones in the Power 5 conferences, and they identified how many diversity, equity, and inclusion staffers, administrators each school had. And then, of course, some schools are bigger than others, so they factored that in by comparing that number ratio-wise to the number of all other educational faculty. And then they ranked the schools based on that. So at the top, you would have like the most woke schools that have the most administrators would be like Stanford. And at the bottom, the least woke school was Baylor University. So what I did is I took this ranking and applied it to the NCAA men's tournament. You can see the full bracket online to see how your school does. But basically, I played out the tournament along those lines, and the final is Baylor versus TCU, with Baylor winning, although Penn State makes a very strong run.
So who do you think, so that's the winner?
Yes, according to the Heritage Rankings, Baylor has the least number of DEI faculty or DEI administrators compared to their faculty. So the whole list is there, and like TCU is at least number 2 for the tournament teams. But there are some other surprises on there. I would check out the whole bracket. It's fun.
That does sound fun. So on the less fun side, obviously we've had the big issue with Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank. It's a new sort of economic crisis for President Biden, and as he's claiming increasing credit for his economic stewardship, even though the polls show the voters think a little bit differently about that. Is there any connection between the Biden spending agenda and these bank failures?
I would have to say yes, absolutely. Right? I mean, when you look at why these banks are failing, or specifically, let's look at Silicon Valley first. They're not failing because they made a bunch of risky loans, right? It's not like a bunch of tech firms went belly up, or a bunch of green energy firms went belly up, and that's why they don't have money coming in. That's why they failed. No, what happened is that they bought a bunch of very safe assets. They bought 10-year U.S. Treasury bonds. This is the gold standard of banking regulation safe asset is the Treasury bond. When they look to see if you have your capital requirements, they look how many Treasury bonds they have. They bought a bunch of them. The problem is that because inflation got so high, the value of these bonds went down, and so they didn't have enough assets to cover all of their liabilities. So why did those inflation go up? And we know the inflation went up because of Biden's reckless spending, because of all the spending he did when he first got into office in 2021. That huge, COVID package just had way too much money spent in it, and that sent inflation up.
So now we're probably going to get the Federal Reserve backing off of its campaign of aggressive interest rate hikes. So how is that really going to affect the whole economic picture?
Yeah, I mean, it seems as though the Fed definitely has got the message that if they want to not cause a wider panic in the banking sector, they are going to have to back off of raising rates. But then that whole leads to the next question is, well, what does that do to inflation? Does that mean inflation is going to rev back up? Ultimately, we don't know. They're going to have to play it month to month, quarter to quarter. And unfortunately, we're all going to find out together. But the core of the problem, again, goes back to Biden's spending. Okay? It's not just Signature or Silicon Valley Bank or Signature Bank or Federal First Republic Bank that is the problem. It's Biden's spending. That's the core problem here.
So in response to this, the Biden administration's response, are we going to get a bailout, or is what we're seeing already a bailout?
Well, it's definitely a bailout of depositors, right? I mean, when you look at Silicon Valley Bank, the stockholders, the people, the investors of the bill, which by the way included lots of pension funds, lots of sovereign wealth funds overseas, they all got wiped out. The executives are all out of their job. So the bank itself didn't get a bailout. It's no longer there, but the depositors did. Now, are a lot of these depositors shall we say, not sympathetic?
Right.
Sure. I mean, apparently, California Governor Gavin Newsom, all 3 of his wineries had their bank accounts at Silicon Valley Bank.
Right.
And who wants to bail out Gavin Newsom's wineries?
Right.
I don't. However, when you're doing these type of things, you can't pick and choose between depositors like that.
Right.
And I haven't seen anything that depositors did wrong to cause the Silicon Valley Bank to fail.
Although some of them on an individual basis at least are the kinds of people Biden would otherwise want to raise taxes on.
Absolutely, absolutely. Anyone who owns 3 wineries should have their taxes raised.
Drink up. Thanks, Conn.
Absolutely.
You can read Conn and the rest of our commentary team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.